Before you needed maybe one subject matter expert to define what should be built and 10 engineers to get the job done. Now you need
Hey Morgan, welcome to Money Bites. Super excited to have you. Just by quick way of intro, you are the head of machine learning and product at Armoire. Well, first off, how does Armoire differentiate itself from other types of competitors out there? What is it and how are you differentiated?
Yeah, it is a clothing rental company. And, we kind of sit in between where we are truly trying to be a wardrobe contributor or wardrobe replacement, where we're, allowing people to come in and make Armoire and this clothing rental part of their day-to-day lives, where, you are trying to truly buy less to subsidize your wardrobe on an ongoing basis. And that could be, high-end event wear. It could also be your day-to-day work outfit, your hanging around the house outfit, you're changing for seasonality, changing for trends. Instead of having to buy for all of these new things, you're able to rent them. And that is a bit of a differentiator from others where they are really focused specifically on just one-off events.
If your competitors are more one-off special events and your company is more enmeshed in the daily styles, does that mean that your user journey has more touch points that you need to be aware of?
Lots of different touch points, I think, and lots of different use cases depending on how you shop. But sometimes I want to come in and I want to scroll through a bunch of different outfits. I want to see a bunch of different options. I want to be truly inspired, but I also want to be a little in control. I want to see something different. I want to see, different pieces. I want to be excited and I want to be, fully driving that experience.
Then in that case, how is AI and ML being applied throughout that journey?
Definitely. Well, I think a big one are the classics that people think about, which is, a search functionality. So again, whether that is specifically, I know I want this brand shirt or this, style shirt or this fabric, we need to be able to get it to you. But also you want to come in and be inspired. I have this theme event coming up. Show me some results that fit that. So both kind of that very specific high intent search. The other, recommendations, obviously a huge one, and the ability to personalize results based on, what you're telling us you want to see. I think the interesting part about having also the physical clothing is a lot of the use of technology in general, but especially AI is kind of around this. How do we maintain the clothes? How do we know we're, keeping track of it in the right place? How are we decreasing that time that it takes to make sure it's clean, make sure it's pristine, put it back in the place we want it to go and pick it up when someone orders it? We want to be getting it out to users as efficiently as possible.
You mentioned in the beginning of this interview that there's a lot of different users that you're actually addressing. So even for me, I have no fashion sense. So what I think looks good on Instagram when I try it at these department stores, it looks horrible on me. But that's what I gravitate towards versus if I had a stylist, I wouldn't know what to tell them, hey, this is my style, because I don't have it. And then I'm sure you also have folks who are, very, very attuned to their preferences, what looks good on them, etc. If you have such a range of potential use cases, how are you going about figuring out your hero use case and then also the success criteria for that?
Yeah, definitely. Amazing questions. I think it is okay to say, hey, we know we're going to have some amount of breadth of our customers, but at any given point with any given feature, I think you can fall into this trap of we have to build this feature immediately for everyone. And then in some ways that can easily degrade the experience for everyone. I am trying to do here is say, hey, who is our core customer for sure, where Armoire is really filling a need for them? Are we filling that need? And then, yes, if we need to expand after that, once we're filling the core needs of that one persona, then we can do that for sure. I do think we are lucky where like a lot of this does overlap. So for example, I keep harping on search because I think that is a huge one. We have people who, now that search can be this more broad conversational piece, you don't have to come in and say, hey, I know I need an Altazura top in this color. You can come in and say, I have this event coming up. Can you help me find an outfit for it? And so it can kind of be this more broadly serving feature where you are really serving not only different customers, one who knows exactly what they want and one who doesn't, but also the same customer who sometimes comes in and is like, hey, I saw this top. I know I love it. I don't really know what else to put together though. So I need your help for the rest of it. And so I think that actually is our core customer, is kind of someone who falls a little bit in the middle of these use cases. And so I think what we need to do and what we have been doing is really focusing in on what features is that person using and how do we define each of those use cases out, figure out which one to focus on first, get that right, and then move on to the next one.
I think you're touching on one of the differentiators of Amar here as well, which I think was referred to as the digital paper doll experience.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I'd be super curious. How do you train a model to have taste?
Yeah. Well, this one is interesting. And I think, I'm a big proponent of these kinds of AI machine learning tools working together with humans. That sounds so weird to say, but with the people who are the subject matter experts. That I think is probably coming up as a theme here. But I think that level of expertise in different areas is so, so crucial right now. And these tools are really helping that expertise come to life. And so I think the way you see that in this feature is that we actually have our stylists and buying team. We have a couple people who have been chosen and are making these amazing core outfits. The problem is that because we're, a rental company, we don't always have huge depth in some of these pieces. Stylists put together this great outfit of, 3 or 4 pieces, but one of them or two of them are sold out in my size. And so the styling and buying team, they don't have time to be creating hundreds of outfits every week just to make sure that everyone has something they can search. So what we did here was use a similarity model, which comes in and says, okay, the stylist created this excellent outfit that they really think is going to be driving trends. Can we now find great alternatives in our catalog for all of these pieces so that if one or two of them are not in your size, or you just don't love one of them because it doesn't fit you the right way, or you don't like wearing halter tops, or what have you, you have kind of all of these options. Now we unlock the ability for the stylist can add, 3, 4 every week, which is kind of what they were doing anyway in the newsletter. And still there's alternatives for everyone to be able to rent.
Here's a few questions. One, like, what would be your biggest blocker in the 10x scale and experience? What would be your blocker? And then kind of tangential to that, what keeps you up at night?
Great questions. Our biggest blocker is knowing the customer's style. Like, what are they looking for? And it also, I think, goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of sometimes the customer themselves doesn't know. They are not able to come tell you. And so it becomes really difficult when you are trying to define someone's style when they themselves can't define it. And they're almost looking to us to define it for them. This is a big, maybe vague answer, but I think the industry as a whole is moving so quickly in so many different directions. And I think there are really some great people out there trying to, draw attention to the fallbacks. I think there's a lot of fun, interesting, exciting use cases for this technology, but there's also a lot of just assumed use cases of, hey, you must want the most advanced technology in this area and kind of technology for technology's sake. And I think that definitely keeps me up at night. There does need to be some more thought through of like, hey, are we building this tech just because we can and it'll be exciting to be able to do it? Or is there a true impact here where we are building it?
How have you been able to surface and resolve when these AI models have failed?
Yeah. Another great question. I feel like I've said that on 12 of your questions already. I do. I think that needs to be, it's always part of the planning process. A lot of building machine models is a lot of that kind of, this goes into the initial like requirements doc building. Okay, you're defining the end case, you're defining the success criteria, but you're also defining the failure criteria. What happens when I truly get an error back? What does it mean for it to silently fail? A lot of these processes can fail silently. I think as much as possible removing that if we can. But I also think a huge part of this is pattern recognition of the output. So if you're seeing, certain areas of your data constantly getting certain labels, that has to be a flag. If you're seeing changes in your mean of certain data, that has to be a flag. Changes in the amount of things getting labeled, that has to be a flag. Because I think you can, in testing, you can look at the model as much as possible and you can, test as much as possible. But once it goes into production, you have like much less control.
A human would need to sort of vet this to even
Yeah.
check this out.
Yeah.
Okay. This also seems to be a great opportunity to visit a hot take that you had, which was the titles of some of these new sort of
Yeah.
AI roles. They seem to be interchangeable in cycles.
Yeah. I think that so many things in this industry and in general are cyclical. If not the titles, like kind of what the titles do. And I think you're kind of seeing it again in a lot of ways with like, go to market being a very popular title now, which I am not against the cyclical process. I just want to call that out. I do think it's helpful. But I think often what happens is something new happens in the industry and we feel that we need someone specialized in order to handle that industry change or a gap that has appeared because of other changes to other titles. So example of this, I think the key example of this in machine learning is like the prompt engineer. Whereas, when LLMs and agentic AI first came out onto the market, we said we need these specialized people whose only job is to evaluate how you communicate with them. And again, I'm not saying that that wasn't necessary at the time, but now I think what you're seeing is we realize that okay, yeah, we do need people who are prompt experts, but they also need to know the end use case. They need to know the customers. They need to be subject matter experts so that that prompt has all the context it needs into it. And so it's kind of being brought back into the normal. Like I think in a lot of places, your product manager becomes also your prompt engineer, or whoever is the stakeholder of subject matter expert in that area is also tweaking the prompt, tuning it and making it exactly what it needs to be to get the results they know the end user wants to see.
Do you feel subject matter experts or even like a data scientist being data scientist, machine learning, software engineer being what they are, product managers being what they are, that demarcation is being faded with the power of these AI models?
Yes. A short answer, yes. I think so. Again, I'll go by theme. Short answer, yes. Long answer, I think we've kind of seen that general. Like, I think you could argue a lot of AI machine learning is following this same cycle at maybe a much bigger circle than prompt engineer, but still same cycle. Like when, ML AI first came onto the scene, you had a specialized ML engineers or data scientists even when it first started whose only job was creating these machine learning models from scratch. And I'm not saying those are going away. I think someone still needs to be working on and building a lot of these systems, but I think at smaller companies or non AI focused companies, you are seeing a lot of that be brought back into the engineering ecosystem. I think we are starting to see, in some ways, I think we're seeing the machine learning field specialize, where people, instead of just being a full stack ML engineer, they are specializing in ops, or they're specializing in, front end or something like that. But in a way, we're also seeing it generalize, where you're not just touching the model piece anymore. You are also thinking about, how is this going to be used? How does it plug into the system and stuff like that?
In the theme of bigger circle, a few last questions. I believe, let me just check. Yes, career satisfaction score or graph right now is at its highest. Life satisfaction score is also at its highest. Do you feel
I'm
like
loving
yay?
that. Yay.
Do you feel like the change in what you're able to do with the technology is also behind some of your improved satisfaction scores, or is it due to other variables?
Another great question. Both, I think, is the short answer here. I think, yes, in some ways, I have always loved the, what are we building? Why are we building it? Basically, how is this thing going to be fun, exciting, interesting, and important to use? And I think being able to be in a position where that is my job, to think about all of those things, is where my expertise lies and where I enjoy it the most. So I think that is a huge part of it. And then being able to see how quickly a lot of these ideas can get tested, can get used, can get prototyped at just such a faster way. You can get a visual for an idea you have the same day, whereas, even a year ago, that would have taken months to see a visual for an idea you have. I think that is really fun, really engaging. I also think that I'm just in a fun space right now. I like being in the fashion space. We have a great office in Seattle. I'm out of Seattle. It's a great community. And I think our customer community, our event community is just really, they're great people. They want to have great conversations. They want to give me feedback. They want to talk about the industry. And I think that is just so important. It's so amazing being in like a very women focused space of people who are excited to talk to me and have interesting conversations. Yeah.
It hasn't always been this case though, because if we look at your satisfaction graph, you've had quite a bit of ooh.
I have a little bit of a roller coaster of a
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
In some
Um,
ways, yes, yeah.
what do you think you learned from some of the earlier roller coaster rides that
Mm,
two
yeah.
parts? One, like things that you were definitely looking for in this role versus things that you knew you definitely would not do in this role.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, I already touched on this, but community,
Mm.
I think, is the absolute biggest one. I think I always knew that it was important to me who I was working with, but I don't think that I really emphasized it enough. And it's hard to get to know a community and what a customer base and employee base looks like of a company you don't work for. So the best job, I think I very much learned the best job for me is not the best job on paper. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, I am really enjoying my job now. It is very fun. It is very exciting. You've seen my like satisfaction graph. I mean, again, it's been 2.5 months. So, but so far, so amazing. But it is, I realized that I like being in an office. I want everyone to have the choice. I'm not saying everyone should be forced to come to office, but I think I tried to goad myself into thinking, yeah, you want this remote job. That's like what everyone wants. I don't think I do well in a fully remote job. I wanted an office. So now I'm at this job. I went from a remote job where I could work from anywhere. I had, great pay, to a startup environment where I have a very long commute into an office. It's a much smaller company. One could argue much riskier. It's not like on paper, it's maybe not the best choice, but it's definitely the one I've been happiest with. And I think it took me a while to realize like, what does good for me mean,
Mm.
and not just what is a good job, but what is a good job for me. And I think that is different for every single person.
What was the definitely I won't ever do this again list from your experience that you brought to the
Hmm.
job search?
Uh, I this is kind of cheating, but I won't ever go somewhere where I don't have good insight into the day to day culture. I think I've
Mm.
done that before where I've thought, hey, this is the right title or the right role or the right product. And so I'm going to jump in and do it. And I don't think that ends well for me. I think it's important to either, if you don't know someone ahead of time, to really do the due diligence. And that can be really hard, especially earlier in your career of like truly trying to vet out the culture of a company, but I will never not do that again. This is not in the interviewing process, but I've been through a lot of companies where they go through very large transitions, whether that be an acquisition or like huge growth and org structure change. And I think that sometimes I have held on too long to, well, you loved it before the transition, so you must still love it now. And I think it's okay to be like, hey, I loved it before the transition is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, could be a great thing for the company, but that doesn't mean it has to be a perfect fit for me anymore. And that's totally okay.
I think that's super interesting, especially in this market when sometimes people are staying at jobs just because they've been staying at the same job.
Yeah.
But
And I mean, it's a hard markets are hard.
yeah,
So I'm not saying you have to get out immediately, but I think there's something to be said of like, hey, went through this big transition. I'm unsure. And because of that uncertainty is not right. Because of that uncertainty, I'm I'm going to see what's out there. And maybe that doesn't mean I'm super actively applying, but I think it's okay to start that before you're sure you want to leave.
mm,
And maybe it comes to nothing. Maybe you decide, like, the transition, I wasn't sure, but it turned out okay and I'm still happy here. Great, then you're still happy there. There's nothing that says you have to leave just because you thought about it for a
mm,
little bit.
mm.
But I do think thinking about it before you're ready, before you're gone, is important.
Last question. You're also an investor, and you've been an investor for a while, it seems, at Backstage Capital. What are you most excited about, and where are you putting your money in these days?
I think maybe I've been talking about like the downsides of the tech not being the moat, but I think there's also this huge upside too, which I've always been excited about, but I think is even more compelling now, where you can have, people who are experts in fashion coming and building cool tech quickly, either on their own or, they're hiring a part-time engineer to come build something for them. But the point being, you have these subject matter experts, whether it's in fashion, finance, healthcare. I was a biology researcher for a while, and a lot of the problems is like you have a lot of these problems that could quickly be solved by technology, but you know, they're not technical people. They don't have the background. So, like, being able to come in and quickly solve a lot of these really jarring problems is great in a lab setting. And I think now you have this ability to say, like, a subject matter expert in this area who understands all of the biases that could be there, who understands the implications of all these different decisions, can come and prototype something quickly and show what the impact could be a lot of these changes. And I think you're starting to see that a lot now as people start to realize that, especially with the improved UI UX of things like agentic AI like ChatGPT, obviously Claude.
I feel like we're actually coming kind of in a full circle because we talked about how these AI tools are allowing title demarcations to fade, but you're actually saying no, there's still a room for subject matter experts to come in with their expertise.
Percent. Yes, 100%. I think that is like actually there's more room now, in my opinion, because that is more of what you need. I think before you needed maybe one subject matter expert to define what should be built and 10 engineers to get the job done. Now you need two of those engineers to get the job done, which I think doesn't actually mean you need less engineers. I think it just means you can get more done if you have more subject matter experts. Now, instead of those 10 engineers working on one thing and one small feature, they could be working on five. And if you have the subject matter experts to come in and say, what do those 5 need to be? Where do we need to be moving? And what does it mean to build them correctly? Then you can be building all 5 of those.
I love the vision that you're setting out for all different types of industries as well as for fashion. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Good. It was great to talk to you. I feel like I've realized more about myself through this conversation. I love it.
Awesome.